The woman's body hit the frozen ground like a sack of grain. 5 children screamed into the blizzard. The smallest one, barely 4 years old, threw herself over her mother's bleeding chest. "Mama, Mama, wake up!" Caleb Thornton hadn't touched another human being in 11 years. Hadn't wanted to. Hadn't dared to. But when that little girl looked up at him with snow in her hair and terror in her eyes, something cracked open inside his chest. "Please, mister," she whispered. "The bad men are coming." Before we continue this story, I invite you to subscribe to my channel and follow this journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Now let's return to that frozen night in Wyoming, 1878. Medicine Bow, Wyoming Territory, December 1878. The gunshot still echoed in Caleb Thornton's skull when he heard the pounding on his door. He bolted upright, sweat soaking through his union suit, despite the December cold that crept through every crack in the cabin walls. His hand found the Winchester before his eyes fully opened. 15 years of war had trained him to wake ready to kill. But it wasn't the war that haunted his dreams tonight. It was Beth. Always Beth. Her face pale against the pillow, her hand going limp in his. The telegram arriving 3 weeks too late. Your wife passed. Childbirth. The baby, too. He'd been treating a typhoid outbreak 50 miles away when his whole world ended. The pounding came again. Harder this time. Desperate. "Ain't open for business," Caleb called out, his voice rough from disuse. Days went by sometimes without him speaking to another soul. He preferred it that way. "Please." A woman's voice cracked, terrified. "Please, my children." Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't move. "Mister," a child's voice now, small, trembling. "Mama's hurt real bad. She's bleeding everywhere." That voice, brave despite the fear. A child standing in a blizzard begging for help. His boots hit the floor before he made the conscious decision to move. The cold bit at his bare feet as he crossed to the door, rifle still in hand. He'd learned the hard way that desperation could be a weapon, that killers sometimes wore innocent faces. He opened the door to the storm. The wind nearly knocked him back. Snow swirled in a fury that turned the world white and blind. But he saw them. A woman crumpled in the snow not 10 feet from his porch. Blood. So much blood spreading beneath her like a dark halo. And standing over her 5 children. 5. The oldest maybe 12, the youngest barely 4, all huddled together against the gale. The oldest girl looked up at him. Dark hair whipping across her face. Eyes too old for her years. "Please, mister," she said. "Mama can't walk no more. The bad men, they stabbed her. They're comin'." Caleb didn't hesitate. He stepped into the storm. The woman was barely conscious. Her breath came in shallow gasps that fogged and vanished in the frozen air. The blood soaked through her dress at the side, spreading with each heartbeat. "How long you been out here?" he demanded, scooping her into his arms. She weighed nothing, skin and bone and desperation. "Since mornin'," the oldest girl answered, herding her siblings toward the cabin. "We walked from Willow Creek." "Willow Creek's 20 miles. "Yes, sir." 20 miles, in a blizzard, with 5 children and a bleeding wound. Caleb's gut twisted with something he hadn't felt in years. Fury at whoever had driven them to such madness. He carried the woman inside the children, slipping through the door behind him like shadows. The cabin wasn't much, one room with a fireplace, a bed, a table, a chair. A life stripped down to necessities. But it was warm, and right now warm meant alive. "Shut the door," he ordered the oldest girl. "Bolt it." She obeyed without question, quick, efficient, like she'd been following orders her whole short life. The other children clustered together near the fireplace, 2 boys, maybe 8 and 6, and 2 more girls, one around 5, the youngest still clutching a rag doll with frozen fingers. Caleb laid the woman on his bed. "Lamp," he said. "On the table. Light it." The oldest girl moved before he finished speaking. Golden light spilled across the woman's face. She was younger than he'd first thought. Maybe 32, 33. Dark auburn hair matted with snow and blood. A face that might have been beautiful before someone used it for target practice. Bruises. Old and new. Split lip barely healed. A gash along her hairline crusted with dried blood. And the wound at her side knife from the look of it. Deep. Still bleeding. "What happened to her?" Caleb asked, already reaching for his medical bag. He'd buried it in the bottom of his trunk 3 years ago, sworn he'd never touch it again. But his hands remembered. His hands always remembered. "Grandpa's men," the oldest girl said quietly. "They caught us at the river. Mama fought. She told us to run, but—" Her voice cracked. "But I couldn't leave her." Caleb's hand stilled on the bag's worn leather. "Her grandfather did this." "No, sir. Our grandpa, Mama's father-in-law." The girl's voice didn't waver. "He don't want us to leave. Says we belong to him now that Papa's dead." Belong to him. Caleb opened the bag. The smell of old leather and medicinal herbs washed over him like a wave from a drowned past. "What's your name?" "Hannah, sir. Hannah Whitmore." She gestured to her siblings. "That's Samuel, he's 8. Daniel's 6. Little Rachel's 5. And the baby is Ruth. She's 4. "And your mama?" "Grace. Grace Whitmore." Whitmore. The name hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. "Whitmore," he repeated slowly. "As in Judge Cornelius Whitmore." Hannah's face went pale. "You know him?" Everyone in Wyoming Territory knew Judge Cornelius Whitmore. Richest man between Cheyenne and the Montana border. Owner of the biggest bank, half the cattle in 3 counties, and most of the politicians. A pillar of the community, folks said. A man of God and good works. Caleb had heard other things. Whispers in saloons. Stories that never quite made it to official ears. Men who crossed Whitmore had a way of disappearing. Women who caught his eye had a way of becoming trapped. "I know of him," Caleb said carefully, turning his attention to Grace's wound. "This is going to need stitches. She's lost blood, a lot of it. Can you save her?" The question was so direct, so adult, that Caleb looked up. Hannah stood at the foot of the bed, hands clasped in front of her, watching him with those 2 old eyes. No tears, no trembling, just a steady gaze that demanded truth. "I'll try," he said. It was the most honest answer he could give. "That's all Mama ever asks," Hannah said softly, "for people to try." Caleb worked in silence, cleaning the wound, threading the needle with hands that remained steady, despite the memories threatening to overwhelm him. How many wounds had he stitched in field hospitals? How many men had died under his hands while he fought to save them? Too many. Always too many. "You've done this before," Hannah observed, watching him work. "I was a doctor, once." "What happened?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "The war happened." Hannah nodded slowly, as if this explained everything. Maybe it did. The war between the states had broken something in the country, something that couldn't be stitched back together no matter how skilled the surgeon. "Mama says everyone's fighting their own war," Hannah said. "Some wars you can see, some you can't." Caleb's hands paused. He looked at the child, really looked at her. 12 years old, maybe. Small for her age. But there was something in her eyes. Something that saw too much. Understood too deeply. "Your mama's a smart woman." "She is." Hannah's voice cracked for the first time. "She's the smartest, bravest person I know. That's why we had to run. Grandpa said—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "Said what?" "Nothing good." Hannah's hands twisted in her skirt. "He said we belong to him now, that Mama's job is done, that she's—" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Disposable." Cold rage settled in Caleb's gut. He'd heard that word before, in different contexts. Soldiers who couldn't fight anymore. Horses too broken to ride. Human beings reduced to objects that had outlived their usefulness. "You ain't disposable," he said roughly. "None of you. Neither is your mama." Hannah's eyes widened slightly. "You don't even know us." "Don't need to. Some things are just true." He returned to his work, finishing the stitches with practiced efficiency. Grace hadn't stirred shock and blood loss, keeping her under. She'd wake soon, though, and she'd have questions. So would he. "Oh, there." Caleb tied off the final stitch, reaching for clean linen to bandage the wound. "She'll need rest. Days of it. But she'll live." "Thank you." Hannah's voice was small now, the adult mask slipping to reveal the frightened child beneath. "Mama said if we could just get to the old Thornton place, she said there was a doctor here once. A good man who might help." Caleb went very still. "She knew my name. She knew someone lived here. Someone who—" Hannah hesitated. "Someone who understands what it's like to lose everything." The words hung in the air between them. "How'd she know that?" "I don't know, sir. She just knows things sometimes. About people." Hannah's eyes dropped. "I do too." Before Caleb could respond, Grace stirred on the bed. Her eyes fluttered open. Hazel, he noticed, with flecks of gold that caught the lamplight. Confused at first, then sharpening with fear as she took in unfamiliar surroundings. "Hannah." She tried to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through her side. "Hannah, where the children?" "I'm here, Mama." Hannah rushed to her side, taking her hand. "We're all here. We made it. We're safe." Grace's gaze found Caleb. For a long moment she studied him. His face, his hands, the medical bag open beside her. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or hope. "You're the doctor," she said. Her voice was stronger than he'd expected. Rough, but clear. Caleb corrected. "I'm just a rancher now." "No." Grace's eyes held his. "You're still a doctor. You just forgot for a while." Caleb didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how this battered woman bleeding on his bed could see straight through to the parts of himself he'd tried to bury. "You need rest," he said instead, falling back on practicality. "That wound's going to pain you something fierce when the shock wears off." "I know pain." Grace's voice was matter-of-fact. "I've been living with it for years." There was a story there. A long one full of dark chapters Caleb wasn't sure he wanted to read. But Hannah was watching him with those knowing eyes. And Grace's hand had found her daughters holding on like she was afraid to let go. And the other 4 children had crept closer, surrounding the bed like a protective wall, their small faces pale with exhaustion and fear. "How far behind are they?" Caleb asked. "The men chasing you." Grace's expression flickered. "You believe us. You walked 20 miles through a blizzard with 5 children and a knife wound in your side." He paused. "Either you're running from something real, or you're crazy. You don't strike me as crazy." A ghost of a smile crossed Grace's split lip. "They lost our trail at Miller's Creek. The snow covered our tracks." She winced, shifting slightly on the bed. "But Cornelius won't stop looking. Not until he finds us." "Or until what?" Grace's eyes went to her children, all 5 of them clustered close, watching, listening. Something fierce and protective burned in her gaze. "Until I'm dead, and he has what he wants." "Mama." Hannah's voice was soft but firm. "Don't talk like that. She deserves the truth." Grace turned back to Caleb. "My children are the sole heirs to their father's estate. My late husband Cornelius's son, he changed his will before he died. Left everything to them with me as guardian, until they come of age. And Cornelius didn't like that. Cornelius expected to control that money through me. When I refused..." Grace's jaw tightened. "He got violent. Not directly. He never does anything directly. But his men..." She didn't need to finish. The bruises told the story clearly enough. "How'd your husband die?" Caleb asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment. "A fall from his horse. That's what everyone says." Her voice hardened. 8 months ago. Thomas was the finest rider in the territory. He'd been on horses since he was 3 years old. "You think Whitmore killed his own son?" "I know he did." Grace met his eyes. "And I have proof. Letters. Documents. Everything I need to destroy him." She paused. "That's why he wants us dead. Not just for the money. For what I know." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Caleb looked at this woman, beaten, bleeding, half-frozen, but still fighting. Still protecting her children with every breath she had left. "One night," he said finally. "That's all I can offer. Storm should pass by morning. You can rest, heal some, then you need to move on." Grace nodded slowly. "One night. We're grateful." "Don't be grateful yet." Caleb moved toward the door, grabbing his coat from the hook. "I'm going to check the perimeter. Make sure no one's followed. There's food in the pantry, coffee on the stove. The children look half-starved." "Mr. Thornton." He paused, hand on the latch. "Thank you." Grace's voice was barely above a whisper. "For not turning us away. For trying." Caleb didn't turn around. "Don't thank me, Mrs. Whitmore. Just survive the night." He stepped out into the storm before she could respond. The cold hit him like a wall, stealing his breath, searing his lungs. Good. He needed it. Needed something to drive away the warmth that had started to kindle in his chest when he'd looked at those children's faces. 5 of them. 5 children ranging from 12 to 4, standing in his cabin with snow in their hair and terror in their eyes. And their mother, Grace. With her fierce eyes and her broken body and her refusal to stop fighting. Caleb circled the property Winchester at the ready, though he knew no one could have followed through this storm. The world was white, and howling visibility reduced to mere feet. Even Whitmore's men, if they were still searching, would have sought shelter hours ago. But he needed the cold, needed the solitude, needed to remember why he lived alone, why he'd built these walls around his heart. She just stopped breathing. The letter had said. There was nothing to be done. The baby came too early. "We tried, Mr. Thornton. We truly tried. Tried. Everyone always tried. And everyone always failed." Caleb pressed his palm against his chest, feeling the hard outline of Beth's wedding ring through his shirt. He'd worn it on a chain since the day they buried her. His own ring still on his finger. Her ring against his heart. "So you'll always carry me with you," she'd said when she gave it to him before he left for the typhoid outbreak. "So you can always find your way home." He'd found his way home. But home had been empty. Cold. Silent. Just like his heart had been ever since. By the time he returned to the cabin, nearly an hour had passed. His fingers were numb, his beard crusted with ice. But his head was clear. He knew what he had to do. One night. One night of shelter. Then he'd send them on their way. Give them food supplies, maybe the name of someone in Cheyenne who might help. But they couldn't stay. He couldn't let them stay. He opened the door and stopped. Grace sat at his table, one hand pressed against her bandaged side, the other holding a cup of coffee. The children had been fed. He could see the empty plates stacked by the wash basin. Hannah sat beside the fireplace, the younger ones arranged around her, all of them finally still, finally quiet. Little Ruth, the 4-year-old, had fallen asleep with her head in Hannah's lap, her rag doll clutched to her chest. The 2 boys, Samuel and Daniel, dozed against each other, their faces peaceful in slumber. Only Rachel, the 5-year-old, was still awake, watching Caleb with solemn eyes that reminded him painfully of Hannah's. "They haven't slept in 3 days," Grace said quietly, not looking up from her coffee. "None of us have." Caleb closed the door softly, bolting it behind him. "They're safe now, for tonight at least." "Yes." Grace finally looked at him, and he saw the exhaustion beneath her strength, the fear beneath her calm. For tonight. Caleb hung his coat, moved to the fireplace to add another log. The flames crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "How'd you know about me?" he asked, his back to her. "About this place." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Stories," she said finally. "People talk about the hermit doctor who lives in the mountains. The man who came back from the war and lost everything." A pause. "The man who stopped saving people because he couldn't save the ones who mattered most." Caleb's hands stilled on the firewood. "That why you came here? Thought a broken man would be easy to manipulate?" "No." Grace's voice was sharp. "I came here because I thought a broken man might understand." He turned. She was watching him with those hazel eyes, gold flecks catching the firelight. "Understand what? What it's like to keep going when everything inside you wants to stop. What it's like to fight for people who depend on you, even when you're bleeding out." Her voice softened. "What it's like to lose the person you loved most in the world and still have to wake up the next morning." Something cracked inside Caleb's chest. Something he'd kept locked away for 11 long years. "You don't know anything about me, Mrs. Whitmore. I know you opened your door tonight when you could have let us freeze." Grace set down her coffee cup, her eyes never leaving his. "I know you stitched my wound when you'd sworn never to practice medicine again. I know you looked at my children, all 5 of them hungry and scared and exhausted, and you fed them." She rose slowly, wincing, one hand pressed to her side. "I know there's still a good man in there, Mr. Thornton, even if you've forgotten." "You're wrong." Caleb's voice was rough. "Whatever good was in me died a long time ago." "Maybe." Grace moved toward the bed, where the 2 youngest girls had been settled. "Or maybe it's just waiting for a reason to come back." She lowered herself onto the edge of the mattress, her face pale with pain. "One night," she said, echoing his earlier words. "That's all I'm asking. One night to rest, to heal, to let my children sleep without fear. After that," she looked up at him, "after that, we'll be out of your life forever." Caleb should have felt relieved, should have felt the walls closing back around his heart, sealing away the dangerous warmth that had started to spread. Instead, he felt something else entirely, something that felt against all reason, like hope. "Get some sleep, Mrs. Whitmore," he said gruffly. "I'll keep watch." Grace studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Good night, Mr. Thornton." "Good night." He settled into the chair by the fire, positioning himself to watch both door and window. Sleep would be long in coming tonight. Too many ghosts, too many questions, too many reasons to keep his distance from this woman and her children. But as the hours passed, as the fire burned low and the storm raged outside, Caleb found his gaze drawn again and again to the bed where Grace slept. To the children scattered around the room, Hannah in the chair, the boys on the floor, the little ones curled together like puppies seeking warmth. 6 people. 6 lives depending on him to keep them safe through the night. He should have been terrified, should have been looking for ways to send them away come morning. Instead, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in 11 years. He found himself making a promise. "Nobody's going to hurt them," he whispered into the darkness. "Not while I'm breathing." One night he'd said. But as dawn crept closer and the storm finally began to fade, Caleb Thornton knew the truth. One night would never be enough. Dawn came gray and bitter, the storm having exhausted itself sometime in the small hours. Caleb hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin walls, every whisper of wind through the cracks, had him reaching for the rifle. But it wasn't danger from outside that kept him awake. It was the woman in his bed. The 5 children scattered around his cabin like refugees from a war he hadn't known was being fought. Grace stirred first, a soft gasp of pain as she tried to sit up. "Easy." Caleb was at her side before he realized he'd moved. You'll tear those stitches. The children, still sleeping, all of them. He nodded toward the fireplace where Hannah had finally surrendered to exhaustion. Little Ruth curled against her, the boys, in a tangle of limbs on the floor. First real rest they've had in days, I reckon. Grace's hand found his arm. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were sharp. You stayed up all night. Someone had to keep watch. Mr. Thornton? Caleb. The name came out before he could stop it. If you're bleeding in my bed, least you can do is use my Christian name. Something flickered across Grace's face. Not quite a smile, but close. Caleb, then. She released his arm, wincing as she shifted position. I need to tell you something. About Cornelius. About why he wants us so badly. You said it was the money, the inheritance. That's part of it. Grace's voice dropped. But there's more. Something I haven't told anyone. Caleb waited. My husband Thomas, he didn't just change his will before he died. Grace's hands twisted in the blanket. He gave me something. Documents. Letters. Proof of every crime his father has committed for the past 30 years. Caleb's gut tightened. What kind of crimes? Murder, fraud, bribery. Grace met his eyes. Cornelius Whitmore has built his empire on blood and lies, Caleb, and I have evidence that could see him hang. The words hung in the air between them. Where are these documents now? Grace hesitated. Then slowly she reached beneath her dress and pulled out a leather pouch, worn and blood-stained, strapped against her ribs. I've kept them on my body since Thomas died. Haven't let them out of my sight for 8 months. Caleb stared at the pouch. So small, so innocuous. And yet, that's why he stabbed you, not to kill you, to find those papers. His men searched me after I fell, but they were looking in my bags, my pockets. A grim smile crossed Grace's face. They didn't think to check where a proper lady wouldn't hide anything. Smart. Desperate. Grace's smile faded. There's a difference. Before Caleb could respond, a small voice cut through the quiet. Mama. Ruth had woken, her ragdoll clutched to her chest, her eyes wide and frightened. I'm here, baby. Grace held out her arms, and the 4-year-old scrambled across the bed, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. I'm right here. I had a bad dream. The bad men were chasing us again. It was just a dream, sweetheart. We're safe now. But even as she spoke the words, Grace's eyes met Caleb's over her daughter's head. They both knew the truth. Safe was a lie they told children. Safe was a luxury neither of them could afford. The other children woke one by one, roused by the weak sunlight filtering through the cabin's single window. Hannah first, then the boys, then Rachel. Within minutes the quiet cabin was filled with movement and murmured voices. Mr. Thornton. Hannah appeared at his elbow, her face serious. There's men on the ridge. Caleb moved to the window without a word. She was right. 2 figures on horseback silhouetted against the gray morning sky watching. How long they been there? I saw them when I woke. Maybe an hour. Caleb's jaw tightened. An hour. They'd been watching for an hour and he hadn't noticed. Too distracted by Grace and her secrets. Mama. Hannah's voice carried across the room. They found us. Grace went pale, but her voice stayed steady. How many? 2 that I can see, Caleb answered. Probably more, we can't. Cornelius wouldn't send just 2 men. Grace struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain that flashed across her face. He'd send an army. Maybe this is the advance guard, scouts. Or maybe they're waiting for reinforcements. The children had gone silent, their faces tight with fear. Even little Ruth seemed to understand, her grip on her rag doll tightening until her knuckles went white. We need to run. Grace was already trying to swing her legs off the bed. We need to... You can't run. Caleb's voice was blunt. You can barely stand. And even if you could, They'd be on you before you made it a mile. Then what do? We wait. We watch. We figure out what they're planning. He turned from the window. And we prepare. Prepare for what? Caleb met her eyes. For war. The morning passed in tense silence. Caleb moved through the cabin, checking weapons, counting ammunition, assessing weaknesses. The children watched him with wide eyes, their breakfast forgotten. You've done this before, Grace said from the bed. Prepared for a siege. The war taught me a few things. Like what? Caleb paused, a box of cartridges in his hands. Like how to kill, how to survive, how to watch men die and keep breathing anyway. Grace was quiet for a moment. Is that why you came out here, to stop breathing? The question hit him like a fist to the chest. I came out here to be left alone. That's not an answer. It's the only one I got. Before Grace could press further, Samuel, the 8-year-old, tugged at Caleb's sleeve. Mr. Thornton, are the bad men going to hurt us? Caleb looked down at the boy, skinny, scared, but trying so hard to be brave. Not if I can help it. But there's a lot of them, and only one of you. I've faced worse odds. When? A long time ago, in places you've never heard of. Caleb crouched down to the boy's level. But I'll tell you a secret, Samuel. It ain't about how many guns you got. It's about what you're willing to fight for. What are you willing to fight for? The question caught Caleb off guard. He looked at Samuel, really looked at him, and saw himself. A scared boy trying to be a man, trying to understand a world that didn't make sense. I'm still figuring that out, Caleb said finally. But I'm getting closer. By midday, the watchers on the ridge had been joined by 2 more. 4 men now making no effort to hide their presence. They wanted to be seen, wanted the fear to build. Psychological warfare, Caleb muttered, checking his rifle for the 3rd time. They're trying to break us before the fight even starts. It's working. Hannah stood beside him at the window, her young face tight with strain. The little ones are terrified. Ruth won't stop crying. Daniel keeps asking if Papa's coming to save us. Caleb's chest tightened. What do you tell him? The truth. Hannah's voice cracked. That Papa's dead. That nobody's coming to save us. That we have to save ourselves. That's a hard truth for a 6-year-old. It's a hard world, Mr. Thornton. Hannah looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. Mama taught us that. She says lies might feel better, but truth keeps you alive. Caleb studied the girl, 12 years old, carrying burdens no child should have to bear. Your mama's right. I know. Hannah hesitated. Mr. Thornton, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you really let us in that first night when we were pounding on your door? You could have ignored us, could have let us freeze. She met his eyes. Why didn't you? It was the question Caleb had been asking himself for the past 12 hours. I don't know, he admitted. When I heard your voice, your little sister's voice begging for help, something just moved. Before I could think about it, before I could talk myself out of it. Mama says that's conscience, the voice inside that tells you what's right, even when your head tells you to look away. Maybe. She says you have a good conscience, Mr. Thornton. She says she could see it in your eyes when you opened that door. She said all that. She says a lot of things. Hannah almost smiled. Most of it's right. A noise from outside cut their conversation short. Hoofbeats, coming fast. Caleb was at the window in an instant, rifle raised. A single rider emerged from the tree line, pushing his horse hard through the snow. Not one of the watchers, this man rode with desperate urgency, like someone fleeing rather than hunting. Stay here. Caleb moved toward the door. Wait. Grace's voice stopped him. She'd managed to sit up, her face pale but determined. That horse. I recognize it. What? The markings, the white blaze on the forehead. Grace's voice trembled. That's Thomas's horse. My husband's horse. Caleb's blood ran cold. Stay inside. All of you. He stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. The rider reined his horse to a halt 20 yards out, hands raised to show he was unarmed. That's far enough, Caleb called. State your business. The rider lowered his hands slowly, reached up to remove his hat, and Caleb's world tilted on its axis. The face was older, weathered, a scar running from temple to jaw that hadn't been there before, but the eyes blue as a summer sky, blue as their mother's had been. Hello, brother, the man said. Been a long time. Caleb couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Marcus, in the flesh. His brother smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Though I go by a different name these days. You're dead. The words came out strangled. I got the telegram. Antietam. They said a lot of things. Marcus dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. Most of it was lies. 15 years. Caleb's voice cracked. 15 years I've mourned you. 15 years I've carried the guilt of not being there when I died. Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I didn't die at Antietam, Caleb. I just stopped being Marcus Thornton. Why would you do that? Why would you let me think? Because of what I became. Marcus's eyes went flat. Dead. What I did. The things I've done since the war. He shook his head. You wouldn't recognize me, brother. I don't recognize myself most days. Caleb's rifle had lowered without him realizing it. His hands were shaking. What are you doing here, Marcus? I go by Gabriel now, Gabriel Cross. His brother's jaw tightened. And I'm here because I work for Cornelius Whitmore. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. I'm the one who tracks people for him. The one who finds the runaways, the witnesses, the problems that need solving. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. I'm the one who tracked that woman and her children to your door. Caleb raised the rifle again. His hands were steady now. Rage had burned away the shock. Give me one reason not to shoot you where you stand. Because I'm here to help them. Help them? You just said you work for Whitmore. I did. Past tense. Marcus took a step forward, ignoring the rifle pointed at his chest. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Caleb. Things that would make you sick if I told you. But hunting down a woman and 5 children so a monster can... He stopped. His throat worked. I can't do it. Not this time. Not anymore. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. Marcus met his eyes. I've given you no reason to trust me. I let you mourn for 15 years. I became everything our mother raised us not to be. His voice cracked. But I'm standing here anyway. Because those children in your cabin, they're going to die if someone doesn't stop what's coming. What's coming? Marcus's face hardened. Cornelius Whitmore himself. He's riding out with 20 men. Not tomorrow. Today. He pointed toward the ridge. Those scouts. They're the advance party. The main force is about 4 hours behind them. 20 men. Caleb's mind raced. 20 armed men against 1 broken doctor and a wounded woman. The math wasn't just bad, it was impossible. Why, he demanded. Why would Whitmore ride out himself? Why not just send his army? Because of what she's carrying. Marcus nodded toward the cabin. The documents. The proof. Whitmore knows she has them. He knows if those papers reach the right hands, he's finished. So, he's coming to burn it all. The evidence. The witnesses. Caleb's gut churned. The children. Everything. Marcus's voice was hollow. He'll make it look like an accident. A cabin fire in winter, tragic but common. No survivors. No evidence. Just another sad story in a hard territory. Caleb stared at his brother, the stranger wearing his brother's face. Why are you telling me this? Why not just let it happen? Because I'm tired. For the first time, something human flickered in Marcus's eyes. Exhaustion, regret, pain. I'm tired of being a monster, Caleb. Tired of watching innocent people suffer because I'm too much of a coward to stop it. You were never a coward. Wasn't I? Marcus laughed bitterly. I let everyone think I was dead because I couldn't face what I'd become. I watched you from a distance for years, Caleb, and never once found the courage to approach you, to explain, to apologize. You've been watching me. How do you think she knew about you? Marcus gestured toward the cabin. The stories about the hermit doctor in the mountains, I've been spreading them for 3 years, steering people toward you when they needed help, trying to find some way to make up for— His voice broke. For everything. Caleb lowered the rifle slowly. His brother was alive. His brother was a monster who worked for worse monsters. His brother had been watching over him in his own twisted way for years. None of it made sense. All of it hurt. What do you want, Marcus? Gabriel. What do you want? To fix what I've broken. Or die trying. Marcus reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a leather journal. This is everything. Names, dates, transactions. Every crime Whitmore has committed. Every person he's had killed. He held it out, including Thomas Whitmore, his own son. Caleb didn't take the journal. That woman in there, Grace, she already has proof. Hers is better for the courts. Mine is better for surviving the next 12 hours. Marcus thrust the journal toward him. Take it, please. It's the only useful thing I've done in 15 years. The cabin door opened behind them. Mr. Thornton. Hannah's voice was tight with fear. Mama says you need to come inside, now. Caleb turned. Through the open door, he could see Grace struggling to stand, her face white with pain. What is it? Riders. Hannah pointed toward the eastern ridge. Lots of them. Caleb's blood went cold. He turned back to Marcus Gabriel, his brother, the stranger. Inside, now. Both of us. Caleb, You want to help, then help. But if you betray us— Caleb's voice went flat. I'll kill you myself. Blood or no blood. Marcus nodded slowly. Fair enough. They moved toward the cabin together, brothers separated by 15 years of death, and lies united by a threat that neither of them could face alone. And on the eastern ridge, the first of Cornelius Whitmore's army appeared against the winter sky. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. The children had clustered around Grace's bed, their faces white with terror. Ruth was crying deep, hiccuping sobs that shook her tiny body. Daniel had buried his face in Hannah's shoulder. Even Samuel, trying so hard to be brave, couldn't hide the trembling in his hands. Grace was on her feet, leaning heavily against the bedpost, her wounded side seeping fresh blood through the bandage. You shouldn't be standing, Caleb said. I shouldn't be doing a lot of things. Grace's eyes found Marcus, hardened. Who is this? My brother. The words felt strange on Caleb's tongue. He works for Whitmore. The cabin went silent. Even Ruth's crying stopped. He what? Worked. Marcus stepped forward, hands raised. Past tense. I'm not. He's the one who tracked us. Grace's voice was ice. He's the reason they found us at Miller's Creek. The reason they stabbed me. The reason my children— I know. Marcus didn't flinch from her fury. I know what I've done. I can't undo it. But I can help you survive what's coming. Why should I believe anything you say? You shouldn't. But right now you've got about 20 armed men riding toward this cabin with orders to kill everyone inside. Marcus met her eyes. You can hate me all you want, Mrs. Whitmore, but you need me. Grace's jaw tightened. She looked at Caleb. Do you trust him? It was the question Caleb had been asking himself since the moment his dead brother rode out of the tree line. I don't know, he said honestly, but I trust that we're going to die without help, and right now he's all the help we've got. Grace was silent for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Tell us what you know. Everything. Marcus moved to the window, studying the distant riders with practiced eyes. 22 men, including Whitmore himself. All armed, all experienced. They're not outlaws or hired guns. They're Whitmore's personal guard. Men who've been with him for years. Men who know exactly what they're doing. And what they're doing is surrounding the property, cutting off every escape route. Marcus turned from the window. By nightfall, they'll have us completely boxed in. Then they'll make their move. Which is fire, most likely. It's Whitmore's favorite method. Clean, efficient, leaves no witnesses. Marcus's voice was clinical, detached. He'll offer you a chance to surrender first. Give up the documents, give up the children, and he might let you live. He won't, Grace said flatly. I've seen too much. I know too much. The only way Cornelius lets me leave this cabin is in a box. Then we don't let him take the cabin. All eyes turned to Caleb. What are you suggesting? Grace asked. Caleb's mind was racing. 22 men, 1 wounded woman, 5 terrified children, a brother he couldn't trust, and himself, a broken doctor who'd spent 11 years trying to die. The barn, he said slowly. It's more defensible than the cabin. Stone foundation, multiple exits, and there's a root cellar with a tunnel that leads to the creek. A tunnel. Built it years ago, in case I ever needed to disappear. Caleb met Grace's eyes. If things go bad, when things go bad, you take the children through that tunnel, you run, and you don't look back. What about you? Someone needs to hold them off. That's suicide. Maybe. Caleb's voice was steady. But those children are going to live. Whatever it takes. Grace stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. Something raw and painful, and desperately hopeful. Why? She whispered. You don't even know us. You don't owe us anything. Why would you die for strangers? Caleb looked at her, this fierce, broken, beautiful woman who'd walked 20 miles through a blizzard to save her children. At Hannah, 12 years old and already a warrior. At the others, 5 small lives that depended on the choices he made in the next few hours. Because someone has to, he said simply. And I've spent too long not caring about anything. It's time I started. A tear slid down Grace's cheek. She wiped it away impatiently. There has to be another way, something besides dying. There might be. Marcus spoke up, his voice thoughtful. Whitmore's arrogant. He believes he's untouchable. He'll want to make this personal, come in himself to gloat before the kill. So we give him what he wants. Let him think he's won. Marcus's eyes met Caleb's. And then we take him. Take him how? Whitmore alive is worth more than Whitmore dead. He's the one with the connections, the power, the money. His men are loyal, but only because he pays them. If we capture him, hold him hostage. His men will back down, Caleb finished slowly. They've got nothing to fight for without him. It's risky, if it fails. If it fails, we're dead anyway. Caleb looked at Grace. What do you think? Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached beneath her dress and pulled out the leather pouch with the documents. I think, she said slowly, that I didn't walk 20 miles through a blizzard just to die in a cabin fire. She held out the pouch to Hannah. Take this. Guard it with your life. If anything happens to me, Mama, no. Listen to me. Grace's voice was fierce. If anything happens to me, you take your brothers and sisters and you run. You find someone honest, a federal marshal, a newspaper editor, anyone who isn't in Whitmore's pocket, and you give them these papers. You make sure the truth comes out. But Mama... Promise me, Hannah. The girl's face crumpled. For a moment she looked every bit of her 12 years young, scared, desperate for someone else to carry the burden. Then her jaw set. Her eyes hardened. I promise. Grace pulled her daughter close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. That's my brave girl. The sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the moment. Caleb moved to the window, his gut tightening at what he saw. The main force had arrived. 20-plus men spreading out in a loose formation surrounding the property from all sides. And at their head, mounted on a tall black horse, sat a silver-haired man in a black coat. Cornelius Whitmore had come to collect his property. "Time's up," Caleb said quietly. "Everyone to the barn, now." They moved fast. Too fast for Grace's wound, but she didn't complain. Just gritted her teeth and kept walking, one arm around Hannah's shoulders, the other pressed against her bleeding side. Caleb carried Ruth. The 4-year-old had gone silent, her face buried in his neck, her small body trembling. Samuel and Daniel walked between Marcus and their mother, their eyes darting toward the distant riders with every step. Rachel clung to Hannah's free hand, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. The barn loomed ahead. Caleb had built it to last: stone foundation, thick timber walls, a hayloft with clear sight lines in every direction. He'd never imagined he'd be using it as a fortress. "Inside, quick." They filed through the door. Caleb bolted it behind them, then moved immediately to the ladder, climbing to the loft to assess their position. What he saw made his blood run cold. Whitmore's men had spread out in a perfect circle. No gaps, no weaknesses. Professional, disciplined. They'd done this before. "How bad?" Marcus called up. "Bad. They've got us surrounded. At least 20 guns pointed at this building." "What about the tunnel?" Caleb looked toward the back of the barn, where a trap door led to the root cellar and the escape route beyond. "Still clear, for now." "Then we've got options." "Not many." Caleb descended the ladder. "And none of them good." Grace had lowered herself onto a hay bale, her face gray with pain. The children clustered around her like chicks around a wounded hen. "What happens now?" she asked. Before Caleb could answer, a voice rang out across the property. Clear, commanding, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Mrs. Whitmore, I know you're in there. I know you have my grandchildren." Grace's whole body went rigid. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Cornelius." Caleb moved to a gap in the barn wall, peering out. Whitmore sat on his black horse about 50 yards away, flanked by 2 armed men. His silver hair gleamed in the winter light. His face was calm, almost pleasant, the face of a man who'd already won. "I'm not an unreasonable man, Grace." Whitmore's voice carried easily across the snow. "I don't want bloodshed. I just want what's rightfully mine." "Your grandchildren aren't property," Grace shouted back, her voice cracking with rage. "They're human beings. They're Whitmores. They belong with family. You killed their father, your own son." A ripple of something crossed Whitmore's face. Irritation, maybe even anger. But his voice stayed smooth. "Thomas's death was a tragedy, an accident. I've mourned him every day since." "Liar." "Grace, please, think of the children. Think of what's best for them." Whitmore spread his hands, a gesture of false reasonableness. "Come out now. Bring the documents you stole from my home, and I give you my word no harm will come to anyone." "Your word." Grace laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Your word means nothing. You gave your word to Thomas. You gave your word to me. And then you destroyed us. I'm offering you a chance to survive. Don't be foolish enough to refuse it." "I'd rather die." "That can be arranged." The pleasantness dropped from Whitmore's voice like a mask falling away. "But it doesn't have to be quick, Grace. It doesn't have to be kind. Think about your children. Think about what my men will do to them if you force my hand." Ruth whimpered. Hannah pulled her close, her young face fierce with terror and defiance. "Don't listen to him, Mama." "I'm not." Grace's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I'm not listening to a single word." Whitmore waited. When no response came, he nodded slowly. "Very well. You've made your choice." He turned to one of his men. "Silas, bring me a torch." The man called Silas dismounted. Tall, broad-shouldered, a face like carved granite, empty of anything resembling mercy. "That's Reed." Marcus had moved to stand beside Caleb. "Silas Reed, Whitmore's right hand. He's the one who stabbed Grace at the river." "Can he be bought?" "No. He's a true believer. Thinks Whitmore is some kind of prophet." Caleb watched as Reed struck a match, lighting a torch that blazed against the gray sky. "Then he dies first." "Caleb, get the children ready. The tunnel, now." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. He moved toward Grace, speaking in low, urgent tones. Caleb climbed back to the loft rifle in hand. Through the gaps in the boards, he could see Reed approaching, torch held high. Behind him, Whitmore watched with cold satisfaction. One shot. That's all it would take. One clean shot, and Reed would fall. But the moment Caleb fired, all hell would break loose. 20 guns versus his one rifle. He might take down 3 or 4 before they overwhelmed him. Not enough. Not nearly enough. "God forgive me," he whispered and pulled the trigger. The shot cracked across the frozen air. Reed stumbled, the torch falling from his hand, his shoulder exploding in a spray of red. Not dead. Caleb had aimed to wound, not kill. He needed Whitmore's attention, needed to buy time. "Everyone down!" he shouted. "Now!" Return. Fire erupted immediately. Bullets punched through the barn walls, sending splinters flying. Caleb dropped flat, crawling toward the ladder as wood exploded around him. Below, chaos, the children screaming, Grace shouting orders, Marcus returning fire through a gap in the wall. "The tunnel!" Caleb dropped the last few feet, hitting the ground hard. "Get them out." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off." "Go." "Caleb, you can't." "I said go." Grace appeared at his side, her face white but determined. "I'm not leaving without you." "Mrs. Whitmore." "Grace." She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "My name is Grace, and I didn't walk 20 miles through a blizzard just to watch you die for us. Someone has to. Then we do it together. Or not at all." Their eyes met. Something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. 2 broken people standing together against the darkness. "The children," Caleb said finally. "They're what matters." "I know," Grace's voice cracked. "But you matter too. Don't you understand that yet?" Before Caleb could respond, the barn door exploded inward. 3 of Whitmore's men burst through, guns blazing. Caleb shoved Grace behind a hay bale, spinning to meet the attack. His rifle cracked once, twice. 2 men fell. The third was on him before he could chamber another round. They hit the ground hard, rolling through dirt and straw. The man was bigger, heavier, his hands finding Caleb's throat and squeezing. Stars burst across Caleb's vision. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Could only feel the life being crushed out of him, one heartbeat at a time. Then a crack of gunfire. The man's grip loosened. He slumped sideways, blood spreading across his chest. Grace stood over them, a smoking pistol in her hands, her face chalk white. "I told you," she said, her voice shaking. "Together." Caleb gasped for air, his throat on fire. "Nice shot." "Thomas taught me." Grace's hands were trembling now, the gun wavering. "He said a woman needs to know how to protect herself." He was right. More gunfire from outside. Marcus's voice shouting something Caleb couldn't make out. And beneath it all, the sound of children crying. "The tunnel." Caleb forced himself to his feet. "We need to move. Now." They found the children huddled near the trapdoor, Hannah standing guard, with a pitchfork clutched in her white-knuckled hands. The younger ones clung to each other, faces streaked with tears and terror. "Where's Uncle Gabriel?" Samuel asked. "He went outside. He said he had to—" A scream cut through the chaos. High, agonized, cut short. Marcus! Caleb moved toward the door, but Grace caught his arm. You can't. There's too many of them. He's my brother. And those are my children. Please, Caleb, please. The word broke something in him. The desperation in her voice, the terror in her eyes, the weight of 5 small lives hanging on his decision. The tunnel, he said hoarsely. Everyone, now! He threw open the trapdoor. Darkness yawned below the root cellar, cold and musty, leading to the narrow passage he'd dug years ago. Hannah, take your sisters and brothers. Follow the tunnel to the creek. There's a horse tied at the old mill. Take it and ride for Cheyenne. Don't stop. Don't look back. But Mama, I'm right behind you. Grace knelt, pulling her eldest into a fierce embrace. I'm right behind you, baby. I promise. Mama, no. No, you have to come with us. I will. But I need to help Mr. Thornton first. I need to make sure you get away safe. But, Hannah. Grace's voice was steady now. Calm. The voice of a mother who'd made peace with what had to be done. Remember your promise. Whatever happens, you get those papers to someone who can use them. You make sure the truth comes out. Mama, promise me. Tears streamed down Hannah's face, but she nodded. I promise. That's my brave girl. Grace kissed her forehead. Now go. Take care of your brothers and sisters. I love you. I love all of you so much. One by one, the children descended into the darkness. Samuel first, then Daniel, then Rachel. Ruth went last, her ragdoll clutched to her chest, her small face wet with tears. Mama, Mama, are you coming? Soon, baby. I'll be there soon. The trapdoor closed over them. Grace straightened her jaw, set her eyes dry. They'll make it to the creek in 20 minutes, half hour to the mill. By nightfall, they'll be on the road to Cheyenne. If we can hold them off that long, then we hold them off. Grace picked up the fallen pistol, checking the chambers. How many bullets do we have? Not enough. Then we make every shot count. A sound at the door made them both spin. Caleb raised his rifle finger on the trigger. Marcus stumbled through blood pouring from a wound in his side. They're bringing the kerosene, he gasped. All of it. They're going to burn us out. The children, in the tunnel, safe, for now. Caleb moved to his brother, catching him as his legs buckled. How bad? Bad enough. Marcus coughed, blood flecking his lips. Caught a bullet. Might have nicked something important. Let me see. There's no time. Marcus pushed him away, his face twisted with pain. Whitmore's coming. He wants to do this personally, wants to watch. Then we give him something to watch. The barn door was hanging by one hinge, now splintered and broken. Through the gap, Caleb could see them coming. Whitmore on his black horse, surrounded by his men, a torch blazing in his hand. Grace Whitmore. Whitmore's voice rang out triumphant now. Your protectors are beaten. Your escape routes are cut off. This is your last chance. Come out now or burn with them. Grace moved to stand beside Caleb. Her shoulder touched his. Warm, solid, real. Whatever happens, she said quietly, thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. I'm thanking you now, in case I don't get another chance. Caleb looked at her, this fierce, broken, beautiful woman who'd walked through hell to save her children. Who'd fought beside him when she could barely stand. Who'd killed a man to save his life. When this is over, he said roughly, I'm going to kiss you, just so you know. Despite everything, Grace almost smiled. I'll hold you to that. The first flames licked at the barn walls. They're lighting it. Marcus had dragged himself to a gap in the boards. East side, the hail catch in minutes. The tunnel entrance. Still clear, but not for long. Caleb's mind raced. The children were in the tunnel moving toward safety. But if the fire spread, if the smoke filled the passage, I need to draw them away. He turned to Grace. The tunnel. You and Marcus. Now. And leave you? I'll be right behind you. Liar. Grace's voice cracked. You're going to sacrifice yourself. I can see it in your eyes. Grace. No. She grabbed his arm, her grip fierce. I lost one husband. I won't lose. She stopped, her face flushed. I won't watch someone else die for me. I won't. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice. Grace's eyes burned into his. You taught me that. Last night when you opened your door, you had a choice, and you chose to help us. Now I'm choosing, and I choose to stay. The flames were spreading now, smoke beginning to fill the air. The children, Caleb said desperately. Hannah needs you. Ruth needs you. They can't lose their mother. Then you better make sure we all get out alive. A crash from outside, shouts, gunfire. Something's happening. Marcus had pulled himself up, his face gray with blood loss. Whitmore's men, they're falling back. What? Caleb moved to look. Through the smoke and flames, he could see chaos. Whitmore's neat formation had broken apart. Men were running, shouting, pointing toward the western ridge. And there, silhouetted against the winter sky, a line of riders appeared. Who the hell? Federal marshals. Marcus's voice was disbelieving. That's a marshal's badge. I'd know it anywhere. Marshals out here? How? I don't. Marcus stopped. His eyes went wide. The telegram. Before I came to warn you, I sent a telegram to the marshal's office in Cheyenne. Told them everything. I didn't think they'd actually... You sent for help. I didn't think it would arrive in time. I thought... Another volley of gunfire. Whitmore's men were scattering now, caught between the burning barn and the advancing lawmen. The tunnel, Caleb said. We need to get to the children. Make sure they're safe. Go. Marcus slumped against the wall. I'll cover you. You can barely stand. I can still shoot. Marcus raised his pistol, his hand trembling but steady enough. Go, Caleb. Get them out. Get her out. Marcus. Brother. Marcus met his eyes. Let me do this. Let me do one good thing. Please. Caleb hesitated. This man, his brother, his enemy, his blood had betrayed him, abandoned him, lied to him for 15 years. And now he was offering to die for him. Don't you dare die, Caleb said roughly. I'm not done being angry at you yet. Marcus almost smiled. I'll try. Now go. Caleb grabbed Grace's hand. Together they ran for the trapdoor, smoke burning their lungs, flames licking at their heels. Behind them, Marcus began to fire. The tunnel was dark and cold. Grace stumbled, her wounded side screaming in protest, but Caleb caught her, steadied her, kept her moving. The children, she gasped. We have to reach the children. We will. The passage seemed to stretch forever, cramped, suffocating, endless. But finally, they saw light ahead. The creek. The exit. And 5 small figures huddled together in the snow waiting. Mama. Ruth was the first to see them. She broke from Hannah's grip and ran, throwing herself into Grace's arms. Mama, Mama, you came. I came, baby. I told you I would. The other children swarmed around them, crying, laughing, clinging to their mother like she might disappear if they let go. Caleb stood back watching, his throat tight, his eyes burning. This was what he'd been fighting for. This was what mattered. Mr. Thornton. Hannah appeared at his elbow, her face wet with tears. Is it over? Is Grandpa? The sound of hoofbeats made them all freeze. A rider burst from the tree line. Black horse, silver hair, black coat. Cornelius Whitmore, fleeing the marshals, had found them. No. Grace stepped in front of her children, shielding them with her body. No, you can't have them. You can't. Move aside, Grace. Whitmore's voice was ragged, desperate. Gone was the smooth, reasonable man from before. This was the monster beneath the mask. Move aside, or I'll ride you down. Caleb stepped forward. No rifle. No pistol. Just his hands and his rage and his refusal to let this end any other way. "You want them," he said quietly. "You go through me." Gladly. Whitmore drew his pistol, aimed at Caleb's chest, and a shot rang out. But it wasn't Whitmore who fell. Marcus Thornton, bleeding, broken, barely alive, stood at the tunnel entrance, the pistol in his hand still smoking. Whitmore looked down at the bloom of red spreading across his chest. His face twisted confusion, disbelief, rage. "You," he whispered. "You were mine. Not anymore." Marcus collapsed to his knees, the pistol falling from his fingers. "Not ever again." Whitmore swayed. His horse danced beneath him, and then slowly, like a great tree felling, he toppled from the saddle and lay still in the snow. Silence. Then, from the direction of the barn, shouts. Hoofbeats. The marshals coming to finish what Marcus had started. Grace was kneeling beside Marcus, her hands pressed against his wound. "Hold on," she was saying. "Hold on. Help is coming." "Tell him." Marcus gasped, his eyes finding Caleb's. "Tell my brother. Tell me yourself." Caleb dropped to his knees beside him. "You're not dying. You hear me? After 15 years, you don't get to die before I've finished yelling at you." Marcus laughed, a wet bubbling sound. "Always, bossy." "Damn right." The marshals arrived, surrounding them with horses and guns, and shouted orders. Someone was barking commands. Someone else was checking Whitmore's body. But Caleb stayed where he was, his hand gripping his brother's, refusing to let go. "Stay with me," he said. "Marcus, Gabriel, whatever your name is, stay with me." Marcus's eyes fluttered closed, and Caleb Thornton, who hadn't prayed in 11 years, began to pray. The hours that followed blurred together like watercolors in rain. Caleb worked on Marcus right there in the snow, his hands moving with a skill he thought he'd forgotten. The bullet had torn through muscle and grazed a rib, but it had missed the vital organs. Luck. Impossible, undeserved luck. "He needs a real doctor," one of the marshals said, hovering nearby. "Needs a hospital." "I am a real doctor." Caleb didn't look up from his work. "And right now, I'm all he's got." Grace knelt beside him, her hands steady as she passed him. Bandages held pressure where he anticipated his needs before he spoke them. "You've done this before," he said, echoing her words from what felt like a lifetime ago. "Thomas was accident-prone." Her voice caught on her husband's name. "I learned to patch wounds out of necessity." "Good. Keep that pressure steady. Don't let up." The children huddled together a few yards away, Hannah standing guard over her siblings with the fierce protectiveness of a mother wolf. Ruth had stopped crying, her face pressed against Samuel's shoulder. Daniel and Rachel sat in silence, their eyes fixed on their mother. They'd seen too much. All of them. Things no child should ever witness. But they were alive. That was what mattered. Marshal Whitfield. A tall man with a graying beard approached, his badge glinting in the fading light. "Federal Marshal's Office, Cheyenne. You'd be Thornton." "I would." "Your brother sent us a telegram. Detailed account of Cornelius Whitmore's crimes. Names, dates, everything." Whitfield's eyes moved to the body lying in the snow. "Saved us a trial, I suppose." "He was trying to kill children." Caleb's hands never stopped moving. "My brother stopped him." "So I see." Whitfield was quiet for a moment. "The men we captured, they're talking, falling over themselves to cut deals. Seems Whitmore's loyalty only ran one direction. It usually does with men like him. Mrs. Whitmore." Whitfield turned to Grace. "I understand you have documents. Evidence of crimes beyond what your brother-in-law provided." Grace nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off Marcus's wound. "I have them. Everything. Enough to put away every man who ever worked for Cornelius." "I'll need those documents, ma'am. Official evidence for the investigation." "You'll have them. But I want guarantees first." Whitfield's eyebrows rose. Guarantees my children's safety, protection from anyone who might want revenge. And Grace's voice hardened. I want Silas Reed, the man who stabbed me. I want to see him hang. Ma'am, I can't promise. Then you don't get the documents. Silence stretched between them. Whitfield studied Grace, this battered woman bleeding through her bandages, her jaw set like iron. You've got nerve, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll give you that. I've got 5 children who need a future. Nerve has nothing to do with it. Whitfield almost smiled. Fair enough. I'll see what I can do. He walked away, barking orders at his men. Caleb finished bandaging Marcus's wound, his hands finally still. He's stable, for now, but he needs rest, real rest, and proper medical care. Will he live? Caleb looked at his brother's pale face, the lines of pain etched around his closed eyes, the 15 years of secrets and lies and regret written in every scar. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he does. Grace's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his blood-stained ones. That's all anyone can ask. They moved Marcus to the cabin, or what was left of it. The fire had gutted half the structure, but one corner remained intact enough to provide shelter from the cold. Grace refused to leave Caleb's side. She helped him set up a makeshift hospital, boiling water, tearing sheets into bandages, following his instructions without question. You should rest, Caleb told her for the 3rd time. Your wound will wait. Grace's voice was firm. The children need to see me standing, need to know their mother isn't broken. You're bleeding through your bandage. Then patch me up when we're done here. Caleb shook his head, something almost like admiration flickering through his exhaustion. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Their eyes met, held. Something passed between them, something that had been building since the moment she collapsed at his door. Something neither of them was ready to name. Mama, Hannah's voice broke the moment. Ruth won't eat. She says she's not hungry, but she hasn't had anything since yesterday. Grace pulled away, her attention immediately shifting to her children. I'll talk to her. Keep an eye on him. I'm not going anywhere. She touched his arm, a brief, gentle pressure, and then she was gone, crossing to where her children waited. Caleb turned back to Marcus. His brother's breathing had steadied, his color slightly better. Still critical, but stable. You always were dramatic. Caleb's voice was rough. Even as a kid, always had to make everything a production. Marcus didn't respond. Of course he didn't. But Caleb kept talking anyway. 15 years. 15 years you let me think you were dead. Do you have any idea what that did to me? What it did to Ma before she passed? His throat tightened. She died thinking both her sons were gone. Died alone because I was too broken to be there for her. Still nothing. I hated myself, you know, for surviving when you didn't, for not being there at Antietam, for every choice I made that led to you ending up in that field. Caleb's hand found Marcus's, gripping tight. And the whole time you were alive, living some other life, watching me from a distance like I was a stranger. Marcus's eyes fluttered. Not stranger. Marcus. Never stranger. His voice was barely a whisper. Always. My brother. Then why? The word came out broken. Why did you leave me? Why did you let me believe? Shame. Marcus's eyes opened, bloodshot and filled with pain. Couldn't face you. What I did. What I became. I don't care what you became. I care that you're alive. You should care. Marcus coughed, wincing. I've done terrible things, Caleb. Things that can't be forgiven. Let me be the judge of that. The war changed me, broke something inside. Marcus's hand tightened on Caleb's. I killed a man after Antietam. Not in battle. After. A surrender. He was begging for his life and I couldn't stop myself." Caleb said nothing, just listened. "After that, I couldn't go back. Couldn't face you, or Ma, or anyone who knew the boy I used to be." Marcus's voice cracked. "So I let Marcus Thornton die. Became someone else. Someone who deserved the darkness. And Whitmore found me, saw what I was, gave me a purpose." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Hunting people, tracking runaways, using all the skills the army taught me for someone else's profit." "But you changed. You sent that telegram. You came to warn us." "Because of her." Marcus's eyes drifted toward where Grace sat with her children. "When I saw her, what she was willing to do for those kids, I remembered. Remembered what it felt like to care about something. Someone." Caleb followed his gaze. Grace had Ruth in her lap now, stroking the little girl's hair, murmuring something that made her smile. Hannah sat nearby, her brothers and sister clustered around her, all of them drawing strength from their mother's presence. "She's something, isn't she?" Caleb said quietly. "She is." Marcus studied his brother's face. "You love her." "I barely know her." "Doesn't matter, I can see it." Marcus almost smiled. "The way you look at her, the way you fought for her, that's not duty, brother. That's love." "It's too soon, too fast. She just lost her husband 8 months ago. And from what I've seen, she lost him long before that." Marcus's grip tightened. "Don't waste time, Caleb. I wasted 15 years being afraid. Don't make my mistake." Before Caleb could respond, Marshal Whitfield appeared in the doorway. "Thornton, we've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Silas Reed, the one who stabbed Mrs. Whitmore." Whitfield's face was grim. "He's dying. Gut wound from the fight. He's asking to speak with her." "Absolutely not." Caleb was on his feet instantly. "He tried to kill her. Tried to kill her children. I know what he did. But he says he has information. Names of others involved in Whitmore's operation. People we haven't caught yet." "Then you talk to him." "He won't talk to me. Says it has to be her. Only her." Grace had risen, her face pale but determined. "I'll do it." "Grace, no." "He has answers, Caleb. Answers about Thomas. About how my husband really died." Her jaw set. "I need to know." "You don't need to face him. Not after everything." "Yes, I do." Grace moved toward him, her eyes fierce. "I've spent 8 months running. 8 months hiding. I'm done being afraid of men like Silas Reed." Caleb wanted to argue. Wanted to lock her away somewhere safe where nothing could ever hurt her again. But he looked at her face, the strength there, the determination, and knew he had no right to stop her. "I'm coming with you. I wouldn't have it any other way." They found Reed in what remained of the barn's tack room, propped against a wall, with a marshal standing guard. His face was gray, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The gut wound was bad, fatal probably. Nothing to be done. "Mrs. Whitmore," Reed's voice was wet, rattling, "came to watch me die." "I came to hear what you have to say." Grace's voice was steady, but Caleb could see her hands trembling at her sides. "The marshal says you have information." "I do." Reed coughed, blood flecking his lips. "But first I want to tell you something. Something about your husband." Grace went rigid. "Thomas, the Judge Whitmore, he didn't just order his death." Reed's eyes fixed on hers. "He made Thomas watch, made him understand why he had to die. The betrayal, the will, the way he chose you and those children over his own father." "Stop!" Grace's voice cracked. "He begged, you know, at the end, begged for his life, for yours, for the children." Reed smiled, a terrible bloody smile. "The judge didn't listen. He never listens." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand." Reed's smile faded. Your husband didn't die a coward. He died protecting you, fighting for you, even when he knew it was hopeless. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Thomas. He loved you, more than his father, more than his name, more than anything. Reed's breathing grew more labored. I've done terrible things, Mrs. Whitmore. Unforgivable things, but I won't lie about that. Your husband was a good man, better than any of us deserved. Silence. Then slowly Grace knelt beside the dying man. The names, the others involved. Tell me. Why should I? Because you're dying. Because whatever happens next, you can't change what you've done. Grace's voice was quiet, steady. But you can choose how you end. You can choose to do one good thing. Reed stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed. You're something else, Mrs. Whitmore. Thomas always said so. He coughed again, weaker now. All right, I'll tell you. Everything. Names, locations, bank accounts. But I want something in return. What? Tell my mother I'm sorry. Reed's voice broke. She lives in Kansas City, Elizabeth Reed. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't the son she raised me to be. Grace reached out her hand, covering his bloodied one. I'll tell her. Promise me. I promise. Reed nodded slowly. Then he began to talk. Names spilled from his lips, men Caleb had never heard of, places he'd never been. A network of corruption stretching across 3 territories. Judges, sheriffs, politicians, all connected to Whitmore, all complicit in his crimes. Grace listened without interruption, her face growing paler with each revelation. The will, Reed said finally, his voice barely audible now. Thomas's will. Whitmore has a copy. In his safe at the Helena house. He was planning to forge a new one. Claim you coerced Thomas into cutting him out. But the original, still valid. The documents you have, they prove everything. Reed's eyes were dimming. Use them. Destroy what he built. It's the only way to keep your children safe. I will. Reed's hand went limp in hers. Tell my mother. I'll tell her. His eyes closed. His breathing slowed. And then quietly, Silas Reed was gone. Grace stayed kneeling for a long moment. Then slowly she rose. Are you all right? Caleb asked softly. No. Grace's voice was hollow. But I will be. They walked out of the barn together, leaving the dead behind. The marshals were efficient. By nightfall, they'd rounded up all of Whitmore's surviving men, secured the documents, and taken statements from everyone involved. Grace handed over the leather pouch without hesitation. Everything's there. Letters, contracts, financial records. Enough to convict everyone on Reed's list. Whitfield took the pouch reverently. Mrs. Whitmore, you've just handed us the biggest case in territorial history. There's going to be a lot of interest in you. Newspapers, politicians, people who want to use this story for their own purposes. Let them try. Grace's voice was tired but firm. All I want is peace. For me and my children. You've earned it, ma'am. More than earned it. The children had fallen asleep by then, curled together in a corner of the surviving cabin. Ruth's rag doll was clutched in her arms. Hannah's hand rested protectively on Samuel's shoulder, even in sleep. Grace stood watching them, her face soft with a love so fierce it almost hurt to look at. They're going to be all right, Caleb said, coming to stand beside her. All of them. I know. Grace leaned against him just slightly, just enough. Because of you. I didn't do anything special. You opened your door. Grace turned to face him. That first night when you had every reason to turn us away, you opened your door. Everything else followed from that. I almost didn't. But you did. Grace's hand found his. That's what matters. They stood in silence, watching the children sleep. What happens now? Caleb asked finally. Where will you go? I don't know. Cheyenne, maybe. Start over somewhere fresh. Grace paused. Unless there's a reason to stay. Caleb's heart stuttered. What kind of reason? Grace turned to face him fully. In the lamplight, her eyes were gold and green and full of something that made his chest ache. You saved my life. My children's lives. You fought for us when you had no obligation to. You made me believe that... Her voice caught. That maybe good men still exist. That maybe I could trust again, feel again. Grace. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. I know everything about this is impossible and complicated and probably foolish. She took a breath. But when you look at me, Caleb, I feel like I can breathe again. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. He reached out, cupped her face in his hands. I promised you something, he said roughly. Back in the barn, before everything went to hell. I remember. I'm a man of my word. And then, gently, carefully, like she was something precious that might break Caleb Thornton, kissed Grace Whitmore. The kiss was soft, tentative. Two broken people finding each other in the darkness. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was crying. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't know why. Don't apologize. Caleb brushed the tears from her cheeks. Never apologize for feeling. It's just for so long I thought I'd never. I know. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I know. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other, letting the warmth sink in. Stay, Caleb said finally. Don't go to Cheyenne. Stay here, all of you. Your cabin burned down. I'll build another one, bigger, with enough room for 5 children and one very stubborn woman. Grace laughed a wet, broken sound. You don't know what you're asking. 5 children, Caleb? 5. I can count. They're loud and messy, and Ruth has nightmares. So do I. And Daniel asks 1,000 questions a day, and Samuel needs someone to teach him to read properly, and Rachel won't eat vegetables, and Hannah's 12 going on 40, and she's going to challenge everything you say. Good. Someone should. Grace pulled back, searching his face. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. But why? Why would you take this on? All of this. Caleb looked at her, really looked, at the bruises still fading on her face, at the strength in her jaw and the fear she was trying to hide. At this woman who'd walked through fire for her children and somehow still had the capacity to love. Because I'm tired of being alone, he said simply. Because for 11 years I've been waiting to die. And then you showed up on my doorstep bleeding and desperate with 5 children who needed someone to fight for them. He took her hands. You reminded me what it feels like to be alive, Grace. I'm not ready to give that up. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Caleb Thornton, you are the strangest, most wonderful man I've ever met. Is that a yes? Ask me properly. When this is over, when the trials are done, and the children are settled, and we've had time to actually know each other. Grace squeezed his hands. Ask me then, and I'll give you an answer. And until then. Grace rose on her toes and kissed him softly. We take it one day at a time. I can live with that. From across the room, a small voice piped up. Mama, is Mr. Thornton going to be our new papa, Ruth? Of course it was Ruth, wide awake and watching with those enormous eyes. Grace laughed a real laugh this time. Go back to sleep, baby. But is he? We'll talk about it in the morning. That means yes. Ruth smiled, hugging her rag doll tighter. I like him. He saved us. Yes, baby. He did. Ruth's eyes closed, her smile lingering, even as she drifted back to sleep. Caleb looked at Grace. I think I've been approved. By a 4-year-old. The real test is Hannah. I'm not afraid of a 12-year-old. You should be. And despite everything, the blood, the fire, the grief, the impossible odds, they both laughed. In the corner of the ruined cabin, Marcus stirred. His eyes opened, found his brother across the room, and something like peace crossed his battered face. "About damn time," he muttered. And then for the first time in 15 years, both Thornton brothers slept under the same roof. 3 months later, the last of the trials ended. Caleb stood in the Cheyenne courthouse, watching as the final verdict was read. Guilty. All counts. The judge's gavel fell like thunder, and the last of Whitmore's men was led away in chains. "It's over." Grace's voice was barely a whisper beside him. "It's finally over." "Almost." Caleb took her hand. "There's one more thing we need to do." They walked out of the courthouse together into the bright spring sunlight. The children waited on the steps, all 5 of them scrubbed clean and dressed in their finest. Hannah held Ruth's hand. Samuel and Daniel stood shoulder to shoulder. Rachel clutched a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked that morning. "Well," Hannah demanded, "what happened?" "Guilty." Grace's smile broke through like dawn. "Every single one of them." Ruth let out a whoop that made passers-by turn and stare. Samuel punched the air. Even Hannah, trying so hard to be dignified, couldn't hide her grin. "Does this mean we're safe now?" Daniel asked. "Really safe." "Really safe." Grace knelt, pulling her youngest son into her arms. "No one's coming after us, not ever again. And we can stay with Mr. Caleb." Grace looked up at Caleb. Something passed between them, a question, an answer, a promise. "That's up to Mr. Caleb," she said carefully. Caleb crouched down to Daniel's level. "What do you think about that, about staying?" "I think," Daniel's face scrunched in concentration, "I think you make Mama smile, and you teach Samuel to fish, and you carry Ruth when she's tired, and you don't yell even when we make noise." He paused. "I think I'd like to stay, if you want us." "If I want you." Caleb's throat tightened. "Son, wanting you is the easiest thing I've ever done." Daniel threw his arms around Caleb's neck. "Then yes, I want to stay forever." One by one, the other children joined in. Samuel's skinny arms, Rachel's tentative hug, Ruth's fierce grip around his leg. Even Hannah, after a moment's hesitation, stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the growing pile. "I suppose you're not completely terrible," she muttered into his shoulder. High praise. Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. "I'll take it." Grace stood apart, watching her children embrace this man who'd become something none of them had expected. Her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. "Grace." Caleb extracted himself from the children, crossing to stand before her. "I have something to ask you." "Caleb, you said to wait, until the trials were over, until things were settled." He took her hands. "Things are settled now." "I know, but 3 months ago you showed up at my door bleeding and desperate with 5 children and no hope left." Caleb's voice was steady, certain. "You changed everything. You reminded me that life is worth living, that love is worth risking, that family isn't just blood, it's choice." "Caleb, I'm not a young man. I'm not rich. I've got scars inside and out that might never heal." He squeezed her hands. "But I love you, Grace Whitmore. I love your children. I love the life we've started building together." Grace's tears finally spilled over. "What are you asking me?" Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple, silver, the band worn smooth with age. "This was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to someone worthy." He held it up, letting the light catch its surface. "I've been carrying it for 20 years, waiting for the right person. Waiting for you. Oh, Caleb, marry me, Grace. Be my wife. Let me be a father to your children. Let us build a life together, a real one with laughter and tears and all the mess that comes with it." Grace stared at the ring, at this man who'd saved her life, fought for her children, opened his heart when he had every reason to keep it closed. "The children," she whispered. "They should have a say. Say yes, Mama." Ruth's voice rang out across the courthouse steps. "Say yes." "Please say yes," Samuel added. I really like fishing. We already talked about it. Hannah said, her voice steady. Last night while you were asleep. We voted. You voted unanimous. Hannah almost smiled. Even Ruth, she said Mr. Caleb gives the best piggyback rides. Grace laughed a wet, broken sound. You conspired against me. We conspired for you. Hannah stepped forward, taking her mother's hand. You've spent so long taking care of us, fighting for us. Let someone take care of you for once. Grace looked at her eldest daughter, this fierce, brave girl who'd grown up too fast, who'd carried burdens no child should bear, who was finally starting to believe in happy endings. You're sure? Grace asked. All of you. 5 heads nodded in unison. Grace turned back to Caleb. Well, she said, her voice trembling, I suppose I'm outvoted. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Caleb slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her right there on the courthouse steps, with 5 children cheering and half of Cheyenne watching. About time, someone muttered from the crowd. Caleb pulled back, grinning. That was Marcus. Grace looked past him to where his brother stood leaning against a lamppost, his arm still in a sling, but his color finally healthy. You're supposed to be resting. Couldn't miss this. Marcus limped forward, his face alight with something Caleb hadn't seen in 15 years. Joy. Real, uncomplicated joy. My brother finally stops being an idiot and you want me to stay in bed. The doctor said. The doctor worries too much. Marcus clapped Caleb on the shoulder with his good arm. Congratulations, brother. You deserve this. So do you. Caleb's voice was rough. When this is over, I want you to come back to Medicine Bow. Stay with us. Be part of the family. Marcus's smile faltered. Caleb, I don't know if... No arguments. You saved Grace's life. You saved my life. The children already call you Uncle Gabriel. Caleb gripped his brother's shoulder. You've been alone long enough. Both of us have. Marcus's eyes went bright. You sure after everything I did? I'm sure. Caleb pulled his brother into a fierce embrace. Welcome home, Marcus. For a long moment, they stood like that, 2 brothers reunited after 15 years of grief and lies and regret. 2 broken men finally beginning to heal. This is very touching, Hannah said dryly. But Ruth needs to use the privy, and Daniel ate something strange, and Samuel keeps asking when we're going home. Caleb laughed. Home it is. The journey back to Medicine Bow took 3 days. 3 days of dusty roads and creaking wagon wheels, and 5 children who couldn't sit still for more than 10 minutes at a time. Caleb had never been happier. Tell us about the war, Samuel demanded for the 100th time. The real stories, with the blood and the fighting and... Samuel. Grace's voice was sharp. That's not appropriate. But, Mama, your mother's right. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. War isn't something to glorify, it's something to survive. Did you survive? The question came from Hannah, quiet and thoughtful. Physically, yes. Everything else. Caleb paused, considering his words. It took a long time. Longer than it should have. But you're better now. Caleb looked at Grace, at the children, at the life spreading out before him. I'm getting there. They reached Medicine Bow on the 4th day. The new cabin wasn't finished yet, just a frame and a foundation, but the old barn still stood, and Marcus had been working on it while they were gone. New walls, new roof, a place to stay while the house took shape. It's not much, Marcus said, gesturing to his handiwork. But it's dry and warm and there's room for everyone. It's perfect, Grace's voice caught. Marcus, you did all this yourself. Had to do something useful, couldn't just lie around healing. He ducked his head, embarrassed by her gratitude. Besides, those children need a proper place to sleep. Ruth's been having nightmares again. How do you know that? She told me. In her letters. Marcus produced a stack of papers covered in Ruth's careful, crooked handwriting. She's been sending me updates. Drawings, too. Apparently, I need to see how tall the sunflowers have grown." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "She never told me." "She wanted it to be a surprise." Marcus smiled. "That girl's got a good heart, Mrs." He stopped correcting himself. "Grace, she's got a good heart. So do you." Grace stepped forward and kissed his cheek. "Thank you. For everything." Marcus turned bright red. There's work to do, I'll just—" He fled before Grace could say anything else. Caleb laughed. "You've terrified him." "Good. He needs more people who care enough to terrify him." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of hard work and unexpected joy. Caleb built. Marcus hammered. Grace organized everything with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. The children helped where they could. Samuel fetching tools, Daniel carrying water, the girls sorting supplies. Even Hannah, prickly and proud, found her place. She took over the cooking when Grace's wound flared up, producing meals that were surprisingly edible. "Where did you learn to cook?" Caleb asked, sampling her biscuits. "Necessity." Hannah's voice was matter-of-fact. "When Mama was too hurt to stand, someone had to feed the little ones." "You've been doing that a long time, taking care of everyone." "It's my job." "It shouldn't have been." Caleb set down his biscuit, meeting her eyes. "You were a child. You should have been playing, learning, being young, not carrying the weight of a family." Hannah's jaw tightened. "Someone had to." "I know, and I'm proud of you for stepping up." Caleb reached out, covering her hand with his. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Your mother and we're here now. Let us carry some of the weight." Hannah's composure cracked, just for a moment, just enough to show the exhausted, frightened child beneath the capable exterior. "I don't know how to stop." "Then we'll teach you, one day at a time." She nodded slowly. Then, unexpectedly, she leaned against his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving us a home. Thank you for letting me be part of it." They sat like that until Grace called them for supper. Hannah's head against Caleb's shoulder, both of them watching the sun set over Medicine Bow. The wedding was simple. A minister from town, a handful of neighbors, Marcus as best man, Hannah as maid of honor. The younger children strewing wildflowers down the aisle they'd created between the old barn and the new foundation. Grace wore a dress she'd sewn herself, white cotton, simple and elegant. Her hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders, the way Caleb liked it. "You're beautiful," he said when she reached him at the makeshift altar. "You're biased." "Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true." The minister cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The vows were traditional, simple. But when Caleb slipped his mother's ring onto Grace's finger for the second time, making it official, making it permanent, his voice shook with emotion. "I, Caleb Thornton, take you, Grace Whitmore, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse in sickness and in health until death do us part." Grace's eyes were bright with tears. "I, Grace Whitmore, take you, Caleb Thornton, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse in sickness and in health until death do us part." "By the power vested in me," the minister said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Caleb cupped Grace's face in his hands. "I love you," he said softly. "I'll spend every day of my life proving it." "I know." Grace smiled through her tears. "I love you too." He kissed her. The children erupted in cheers. Ruth threw herself at their legs. Samuel whooped. Daniel asked if this meant he could call Caleb Papa now. "If you want to." Caleb said, his voice rough. "I want to." Daniel's face split in a grin. "Papa." The word hit Caleb like a physical blow. Papa. He'd never thought, never dared to hope. "Papa." Ruth echoed, not to be outdone. "Papa, Papa, Papa." Soon all 5 children were chanting it, laughing, dancing around their newlywed parents in a chaos of joy and noise. "What have we done?" Grace murmured, leaning against him. "Started a family." Caleb wrapped his arm around her. "A real one." "Are you scared?" "Terrified." He kissed the top of her head. "But it's the good kind of terror, the kind that means you've got something worth losing." That night, after the children were asleep and the guests had gone home, Caleb and Grace sat on the porch of the half-finished cabin, watching the stars. "A year ago," Grace said quietly, "I was trapped in a nightmare, beaten, terrified, watching my children suffer and unable to stop it. And now I'm sitting on a porch with my husband, listening to my children sleep peacefully for the first time in years." She leaned against him. "It doesn't feel real." "It's real." Caleb took her hand. "All of it." "How do you know?" "Because real things hurt. Real things are messy and complicated and don't make sense." He kissed her fingers. "Real things are worth fighting for." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever think about Beth?" The question should have hurt. Once it would have destroyed him. But now, every day, Caleb admitted. "She was my first love, my first loss. I'll never forget her." "Do you think she'd approve of me of this?" Caleb reached under his shirt and pulled out the chain he still wore, Beth's wedding ring resting against his heart. "Beth wanted me to be happy. She wanted me to live, not just survive." He looked at Grace. "I think she'd love you. I think she'd be grateful that someone finally got through to me." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "You still wear her ring?" "I always will." Caleb covered her hand with his. "Is that all right?" "It's more than all right." Grace lifted his hand and kissed it. "It tells me you know how to love, how to remember, how to honor what came before while embracing what comes next." "I love you, Grace." "I know." She smiled. "I love you too. All of you. Even the broken parts. Especially the broken parts. Especially those." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Papa," a small voice from the doorway. Caleb turned to find Ruth standing there, her rag doll clutched to her chest, her eyes wide in the darkness. "What is it, sweetheart? I had a bad dream." Ruth's lower lip trembled. "Can I sit with you?" "Come here." Caleb opened his arms, and Ruth scrambled into his lap, settling against his chest with a sigh of contentment. "The bad men aren't coming back, are they?" "No, baby. They're never coming back." "Promise." "I promise." Ruth's eyes drifted closed. Within minutes she was asleep, her small body warm and trusting against his. Grace watched them, her expression soft. "She loves you." "The feeling's mutual." "She's not the only one." Grace reached out, touching his face. "All of them, Samuel, Daniel, Rachel, Hannah, they've started calling you Papa when you're not around. Did you know that?" Caleb's throat tightened. "I didn't." Hannah tried to hold out the longest, said she didn't need a new father, that she was fine on her own. Grace smiled. "Last week I heard her telling Rachel that Papa would fix her broken toy. She didn't even realize she'd said it." "I don't deserve them." "Maybe not." Grace's voice was gentle. "But you have them anyway. That's what grace is, Caleb. Getting what you don't deserve. Being loved when you haven't earned it." He looked at her, this woman who'd walked through fire for her children, who'd survived horrors he could barely imagine, who'd still found room in her heart for a broken man with nothing to offer. "How did I get so lucky?" "You weren't lucky." Grace leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. "You were brave. You opened your door when you could have turned us away. You fought when you could have run. You loved when you had every reason to keep your heart closed." "So did you." "Then I suppose we're even." She kissed him softly, carefully, mindful of the sleeping child between them. "Come to bed," she whispered. "Our bed. our home, our family. Caleb carried Ruth inside, laying her gently on the small bed she shared with Rachel. He tucked the blanket around her, brushed the hair from her face, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Good night, little one." "Good night, Papa," Ruth murmured in her sleep. He found Grace waiting in the doorway of their room, the room they'd built together with their own hands for this exact moment. "Ready?" she asked. "For what?" "For the rest of our lives." Caleb took her hand. "I've been ready since the moment I opened my door." Months passed. The cabin grew. The children flourished. Samuel learned to read properly, devouring every book Caleb could find. Daniel stopped having nightmares, his laughter ringing out across the property every morning. Rachel discovered a talent for drawing filling pages with images of horses and mountains and her new family. Ruth grew 3 inches and lost her fear of strangers. And Hannah, fierce, proud Hannah, finally learned to be a child again. She still helped with the cooking and minded her siblings, but now there was time for fishing with Samuel, for riding with Marcus, for sitting on the porch with Grace, and talking about nothing and everything. Marcus stayed. He built a small cabin of his own at the edge of the property, close enough to be family, far enough to have his own space. The children adored him, especially Daniel, who followed him everywhere like a shadow. "Uncle Gabriel," Daniel said one day, "will you teach me to track?" Marcus looked at Caleb, uncertain. "If your papa says it's all right." "It's all right," Caleb said. "Just make sure he learns the right lessons." The right lessons. How to find things that are lost. How to help people who need it. Caleb met his brother's eyes. How to use your skills for good, not harm. Marcus nodded slowly. "I can do that." And he did. One evening, as summer faded into autumn, Caleb sat on the porch watching his family. Grace in the garden, harvesting vegetables with Rachel. Hannah reading to Ruth under the oak tree. Samuel and Daniel racing toward the creek, their laughter echoing across the fields. Marcus repairing the fence, whistling a tune their mother used to sing. "You look happy." Caleb turned. Grace had come up beside him, dirt on her hands, a smile on her face. "I am happy." "Good." She settled beside him, leaning against his shoulder. "You deserve it." "So do you." "I know." She laughed softly. "It took a while, but I finally believe it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. "Caleb, thank you." "For what?" "For opening your door." Grace's voice was soft. "For giving us a chance. For loving my children like they were your own." "They are my own." Caleb's voice was firm. "Every single one of them." "I know," Grace smiled. "That's why I'm thanking you." She kissed his cheek and went to call the children for supper. Caleb stayed on the porch a moment longer, watching his family gather around the table through the window. 6 voices talking and laughing over each other. 6 faces lit by lamplight and love. He thought of Beth and the life they'd planned together. He thought of Marcus lost and found, and finally home. He thought of the night that had changed everything. The blizzard, the pounding on his door, the woman and children who'd crashed into his solitude and refused to leave. Once he'd believed that loss was all there was. That grief was his only companion, loneliness, his only fate. He'd been wrong. Life, he understood now, wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about finding people worth hurting for, worth fighting for, worth living for. Caleb Thornton had found them, and he would spend every day of his life grateful for the frozen night when they'd found him. "Papa," Ruth's voice rang out from inside. "Mama says supper's ready." Caleb smiled. "Coming, sweetheart." He rose, stretched, and walked toward the light, toward his family, toward home. The storm that had nearly destroyed them had passed, leaving behind something stronger, a love forged in fire, a family built on choice, and a future as bright and endless as the Wyoming sky. And Caleb Thornton, the broken man who'd sworn never to love again, discovered that sometimes the greatest healings come from the deepest wounds. That sometimes home isn't a place you find, it's a family you choose. And that sometimes when you open your door to strangers in the storm, you find yourself letting in the rest of your life.